All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and call the Committee of the Whole meeting for March 14th to order. March 14th, I'm looking up. So we actually, yes, it is March 14th. Okay. Oh my goodness, it is, isn't it? We are flying through this year. Let the record reflect the starting time of 5:31. With that being said, Clerk Volk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Hussein.
Here.
Councilmember Wood.
Here.
Councilmember Spatafor. Councilmember Spitzley. Here. Councilmember Garza. Here. Councilmember Jackson. Councilmember Daniels. Here. Councilmember Brown.
Present.
All members present, you have a quorum of 8.
Excellent. That brings us to the meeting minutes for February 28th, 2022. Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. I would move the minutes of February 28th as written.
There is a motion on the floor for the discussion. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That brings us to public comment on agenda items. Dissimilar to City Council, we don't have sign up. We do invite folks to come on down if they have public comment on any of the agenda items before us. We do have 2 presentations as well as a resolution for the ratification of a TA with Teamsters 214 supervisory and non-supervisory units. Should you have public comment, we simply ask that you state your name for the record. Seeing none. That moves us to item number 5, presentations. We do have 2 presentations tonight. The first presentation being a presentation on fiscal year 2021-2022 second quarter general fund status report and vacancy positions report. Jake, we appreciate you being here. We do in fact have Jake Brower, who is our budget director. Let me first say I very, very much appreciate you and your patience with us on February 28th. We had scheduled Jake Brower. He did have the understanding that we might not be able to make it to him and he might need to be back at this meeting. And he was very gracious in accepting kind of that charge, and here he is before us tonight. You guys do have documents in your packet that will probably be referenced to throughout the presentation. So with that being said, I would turn the floor over to Mr. Jake Brower. Thanks for being here.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here and glad to serve at the will of council. So always ready to present as to the fiscal health of the city. Overall, you have the second quarter general fund status report for fiscal year 2022 for the period July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. Overall, the city budgeted to end fiscal year 2021 with about $14 million in combined general fund reserves, budgeting $133 million in total revenues, including transfers, and $151 in total expenditures for an ending fund balance of $14 million after use of American Rescue Plan Act funds, supplementing government services to the extent of revenue losses. The city's fund balance policy recommends a fund balance between 12 and 15% of expenditures. The city's financial audit is now complete, finding that the city has exceeded the threshold through a combination of one-time savings, state and federal support, and improved income tax collections. The administration has reserved these excess funds into committed fund balance pending further action and discussion by City Council in the administration related to city ordinance and budget policies. We are preparing a budget amendment to go along with the FY23 executive budget proposal, which will be delivered to this body on March 28th. Overall, at the first page, you'll see a pie chart including a breakdown of the 22 general fund budget. You'll see again that the largest portion of that is our retirement or fixed costs. This includes our pension contribution, our retirement healthcare contributions towards benefits, workman's comp, and sick leave, vacation leave buyouts that occur at the end of a person's occupation at the city. Overall, revenues through December are on track with expectations for the amended budget. We are approaching March, the end of March, so you'll be seeing an update fairly soon. Property taxes are 35% of our budget, largely collected at the beginning of the fiscal year. Revenue currently exceeds budgeted amounts. However, this is subject to tax appeals and adjustments, in particular tax captures, which are largely calculated around this time of year, confirmed by our partners at the Economic Development Corporation, and those will be accounted for properly very soon. Income tax collections have been a source of significant concern as we look at COVID-19 and its impacts, particularly looking into the future. Now that we've completed a full year worth of audit of COVID-19, we have a baseline for understanding how much we have been impacted. Overall, when we first looked at this pandemic, we projected around a 20 to 25% cut from our original projection of about $39 million for that year. It turned out that we only lost about $2 million from that source. So that's been very favorable, although, of course, we're still looking with caution as we look into future years and what growth we may expect. Return on equity is a payment we receive from the Board of Water and Light at 2 times of the year, December and June. The current contract includes a guaranteed $25 million payment to the city and 3% of the Board of Water and Light's June 1 to May 31 revenue in excess of $409 million, $836.66. Specifically, this is revenue from retail and wholesale chilled water, electric, steam, heat, and water utilities, coming out to about 19% of our general fund budget.
Can I stop you real quick?
Yes.
So my understanding is in terms of the Second Amendment to that agreement that we have, we are in the last year of that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so where are we at in terms of negotiations?
Overall, we are fairly close to the end of negotiations. You should be able to expect that we are on track to getting that approved by the end of this fiscal year. So it'll be in place as
All right,
part
and
of
are we also looking at right now it's 3% in excess of $409 million. Are we looking at that percentage as part of that negotiation as well?
Yeah, so overall, the discussion is in development. We are looking to go away from the fixed dollar amount back to the variable rate now that we've gotten a little farther past the pandemic and we have a little bit more control over our revenues. So more details will be presented to this body soon.
All right, President Spatafor.
Jake, I don't need the information.
Did I say president?
Yes, you did.
I just like
it's,
hearing-
it's a night already, isn't it, folks?
I just like hearing it.
Councilman Spatafor, go ahead.
Well, now our former vice president, current president, threw me off here. Oh, could you? I don't need the information today. Would you mind just running an analysis to see had we stuck with the formula, what we would have lost or gained? Just I'm curious for when Dick comes with us and says he was very generous in freezing it. We appreciate that, but I want to know if there was a loss or a gain. They're just out of curiosity. I think it was the right move to do regardless, but I wanted to know the difference.
Yeah, overall, this city, I would say, gained.
I figured that's what the answer was going to be. Thank you.
It's a great question. I think I'm also curious to know, did their revenue during the agreement ever actually climb in excess of that number, and did we receive a payment?
No,
No? Okay, thank you.
and we confirmed that by looking at their year-end audit.
Vice President Wood.
I would also suspect that the indebtedness has changed from what it had been previously to what they have incurred because of the pandemic. Is that correct?
Are you talking us to the Board of Water and Lights
Yes.
financials? I can't really speak to those in broad detail, but
If you could check into that, I would appreciate it.
yeah.
I think the rate of indebtedness, because of outstanding bills, I think we heard when they were before us that it was quite substantial compared to what it had been in the past.
Mhm.
So their outstanding debt would also be applicable, not just what they're billing, but what they're actually able to collect.
The city has also aggressively attempted to seek mutual grant opportunities between us. You'll recall that during the CARES Act funding, we attempted to apply for public safety, public health payroll reimbursement with the Board of Water and Light. They were ultimately determined to be ineligible. We have also received significant amount of coronavirus emergency rental assistance grants, about $6.9 million, which to date has been used for utility assistance. I've reached out to the HRCS department and them to our partners with Capital Area Housing Partnership and Advent House Ministries to see if there's a way that we can better integrate our relationship with Board of Water and Light to work on resolving outstanding utility bills.
Vice President Wood.
What are you doing with Consumers Power?
Personally, very little.
I mean, that's a utility too, and you might have electric and you might have water, but
They would be eligible of SARA funds. We would not gatekeep that.
okay. But we haven't had any discussions with, is what you're saying, with somebody at Consumers Power at this point.
No, I'd be glad to reach out to them.
I think that's something that absolutely, I mean, some of the highest bills were in the last couple of months because of the cold weather, so.
Yep. And if you have any contacts there who would like to speak to us, we'd gladly
I
listen
think
to
I've
them.
got someone, I'll check Jake and then get back with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for being here, Jake. This might be somewhat for the city attorney, but just considering how the return on equity from the Board of Water and Light is so much of our budget annually, and these negotiated deals, I just am so curious how, when the Board of Water and Light is a public utility in the charter, and like we share, people kind of, just how does the negotiation process go? Is it like the mayor and the commissioners, or the attorneys, or the mayor and and Dick Peffley? Just for my information.
Probably everyone. In the past, I've always done the negotiations with the finance director and the Board of Water and Light's executive director. Most recently, I don't know. I think finance is doing it right now.
Yeah.
Although we do the contracts, fine tune it and put it to the board and all that. I've been at, I'd say the last 3 Board of Water and Light meetings, Board of Water and Light trustee meetings, and have not heard that discussion, so I don't know if it's up on their political agenda yet. Maybe before then it was, but not recently. Jake, I don't know if you can add something to that.
Yeah, my last talks with the Board of Water and Light, they were going to present a copy of it, although they were going to leave some of the numbers blank, but otherwise provide the form for review.
Does that answer your question?
It does. It's just a comment on that. I mean, it's just so strange because the mayor is ultimately, appoints, and we say yes or no to the commissioners, and he also can, set the executive director. It's just like, it almost seems like we're all the same team, but these, the money that comes back is so high, a bigger percentage than almost anything we deal with. So I just wonder, like, tweaking it one way or the other seems like it would have a big return or net difference. And it's just like the negotiation just seems kind of like, I don't know, it's strange because it's not 2 different parties in my view. So I'm just curious how that actually ends up going down. Thank you.
Do you want to respond? Go ahead.
Well, just generally, and I think when we're dealing with development contracts or anything of that nature, the negotiations across the table usually occur between the executive branch of both entities. And then when that's all fleshed out, it goes to the full board. What I was referring to is I have not seen anything on the full board at the Board of Water and Light in the last 3 months yet. So I'm assuming you're still negotiating.
Vice President Wood.
As the city attorney said, the agreement is approved by the Board of Commissioners. It comes to council. We also approve it. I have been here where we did not accept what the board sent us and told us that we wanted something different and sent it back to them. So there is still, once it comes to us, we still do have some say as to what we're looking at.
All right, Jake, I believe we are on state revenues.
Excellent. State revenues are on track with October and December revenue sharing payments received by the city. In this note, you'll see we stated that some risk remains with constitutional revenue sharing being adjusted to account for the 2020 census, beginning with the February payment. We now know the extent of that impact. Overall, based on numbers from the Senate fiscal agencies, we can expect to see a $600,000 negative adjustment to constitutional revenue sharing. At the same time, the state has received significant sales tax in excess of what they had originally projected. So those two forces are counteracting against each other, leaving us at an overall fairly neutral standing based on where we originally projected to be.
Just very quickly, I'm sorry. If I recall correctly, it was 1.8%, correct, in terms of a decline. Are we planning to challenge that or no? Does anybody know?
Yeah.
Our office is working to, do you mean challenge the payment?
Yeah,
or
so
challenge the
as early
census
as
number?
January, we as a municipality, we were able to challenge those results. I remember back in the summer, when some of these results first came out, that Mayor Shore had said that we were going to actively look to challenge.
The census numbers, not, right, yeah, that's still in process, yeah. We looked at that. The federal government allows actually a kind of a shockingly long deadline for that work. So, yeah, we've got some time and we are working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Overall, state revenues are 15% of the general fund budget. The remaining categories of expenditures are about 10% of the budget, largest being charges for services, reimbursing the city for various services, code compliance, reimbursements, public safety charges. Overall, revenues are fairly on track. Looking at expenditures, you'll also notice that we are on track. There's slight over expenditures on, internal audit, economic development and planning, and that looks like it for December 31st. Like I said, we'll have an update for this upcoming month coming up soon.
Vice President Wood?
Jake, I realize we're looking at the January one and the March one will be coming, but what are we looking at as far as fuel prices? At one point, we had a fuel contract in our own area that we had fuel dumps that we would purchase large quantities of fuel. I don't believe we still do that. Has there been any look as to, because again, when we look at our services, whether it is picking up trash or whether it's code compliance where we've got people out in cars, our police force, our fire department, all of those need that fuel.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can explore that.
Okay, if you could look at what you anticipate with these additional costs that are out there.
I'll try and include a comment in the
All right,
March
thank
report.
Councilman Garza?
Thanks, Council President. And I guess if you're doing that studies, could you look to see potentially what happened in the past, like 10 years ago when gas prices were at this high? If there was something that you guys did? Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Jake?
All right. Overall, the administration continues to monitor expenditures and seek out necessary savings, both to maintain vital services while also making strategic investments in the city, its economy, and life for residents. Due to the American Rescue Plan Act, the city is able to continue our services despite severe negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'd be having very different conversations right now without the generous support of the federal government, from the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, the bipartisan infrastructure package, which we're working on competitive applications towards grant funds. Overall, our goal is to explore every opportunity available to us and hopefully resolve these significant challenges ahead. The next 4 pages show a numerical description of the general fund revenues in detail, a departmental summary of expenditures by department, a breakdown by budget appropriation, so budget and appropriation category, and lastly, a governmental summary which separates out certain expenditures such as retirement fixed costs and information technology expenses, which do not directly reflect the operations of individual departments.
Are you getting ready to transition over to the vacancy report?
Yep, if you have no further
So,
questions.
just very quickly before we transition over, Mr. Brewer, any questions or comments out of your office on the general fund status report?
No, and like I said, I do want to commend the finance staff for adding the additional information about the government, the breakdown personnel and operating. I know that's been a improvement since I've been here. It adds a lot more detail and it matches a lot of the best practices. And it matches the budget document. So I really, like I said, we don't go into detail a lot of times with that individual detail, but it's there. It's more transparent.
That is encouraging. Thank you. Are there other questions or comments from council members? Mr. Jackson?
Just quickly, Jake, there's one thing that caught my attention. You said that we would have a very different conversation but for the generosity of the federal government and the CARES Act. And that's also like one time. So what kind of conversation do you anticipate us having next year when we don't really get to apply that and everything that projected?
Mhm. So overall, some of this will be answered with our upcoming budget amendment and FY23 proposal. You'll recall that for the current year budget, we plan to use about $18 million and change towards general fund services, directly subsidizing revenue loss, and another $5 million towards parking fund services. Our intent is that we will no longer need to apply that immediately in this current fiscal year, but use the savings from last year and expectations for this current year to spread that over several years to last us until 2024. And within that time to implement other structural changes such as our recent administrative improvements to the way that we provide healthcare services in order to really address this deficit, whether both the cyclical and structural effects of it. Yeah, sorry if that was long-winded and circular.
Councilman Spatafor?
No, I just think that's a great question from Councilmember Jackson, and I wanted to let him know that Jake and I have been talking in the Ways and Means Committee too, that they know we'll be watching closely on the structural versus ongoing deficit to make sure that whatever budget the council takes a look at is either balanced or plans to be balanced within the arc of when ARPA funds will run out. So great question. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are ready to move on to the vacancy report.
Excellent. So the vacancy report consists of the vacant positions as of December 31st, 2021. You'll recall that in our general fund, we budgeted $1.4 million in vacancy savings. I would anticipate that with our next year's budget proposal, that number will be less as we move from a state of, during the pandemic, being very cautious about hiring new positions to really being in the stage where we want to be at the top of our game operationally. And so we've been actively engaged in the hiring process, really looking at what we can do to fill all these positions so that we can bring down those concerns. Yes.
Councilwoman Spitzley?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm looking at this list of vacancies here.
Mhm.
Is your finance department fully staffed?
Let's see. So at this time, we had the finance director position vacant where I was interim at the time, and then our buyer position vacant. Right now, we have the finance director position filled, Desiree Kirkland has been doing an excellent job working as both finance director and treasurer, and that's a permanent solution for the city going forward. The buyer position, we had some challenges in finding a applicant for that position. However, I can happily report that we have recently hired that position, and we expect someone to come on in the next couple weeks. And then apart from that, all of the other positions, at least in the finance operating budget, has been filled. Yeah.
Go ahead with your follow-up.
So when we had the discussion with the internal auditor, one of the responses as to why there were still material deficiencies in some of the other deficiencies outlined by the auditor was that you guys were short-staffed.
Yeah.
And so
I'd be glad to speak to that. So one of the things that, and you'll hear this talking to pretty much any department across the city, is that during the last major recession, 2008, there was not the significant support that we received from the federal government. And as a result, citywide departments were really cut to the bone in terms of what staffing cuts could be made. Vacant positions were eliminated outright from the budget. The finance department, which used to have a finance director, budget manager, controller, 2 budget analysts, 6 accountants, 2 accounting clerks, 3 admin positions, dropped down to 9 out of like those 20 or so. And so there's long-term impacts of that. As you can imagine, there's with fewer people, there's more risk of financial controls being overlooked, greater opportunity for error. It's not something that the finance department experienced alone. Departments across the city face these challenges, and overall, our staff has done a great job in meeting many of those challenges, but we are asking people to do 2 or 3 jobs, and hopefully that is something that we're planning to address in our next year's budget.
Do you have a follow-up?
does that, I'm trying to figure out my next question. So that does mean that you're planning on adding new positions in the finance department to address some of
Correct.
the 6-year concerns that we've had with some of the audit challenges?
It is,
And so those are not outlined on this current list of vacancies because,
because they're not funded in the FY22 budget.
okay, thank you.
Vice President Wood, then Councilman Daniels.
A couple of questions I've got for you, Jake. First of all, let me make sure. Under the fighter trainee, it says overfilled. Can you tell me what that means?
So overall, in the trainee positions between police and fire mostly work in that if there's a vacancy, we can hire a trainee. So we don't budget 5 trainees in the department, but if we have 5 firefighter positions, we put in for 5 trainees, possibly up to. At the time of this report, which might have just been a data error or the department balancing anticipated retirements, there were 6 more trainees and there were vacancies. I believe in following up on that data, that has since gone away, so positions that have left or retired since then have accounted for that.
We're getting almost where I need to be with this vacancy factor, okay? I'll come back to the contracts again.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see what the offset is where it says a contract. How much are we saving, or is it over what is budgeted for that position? You know, we got the dates in. I'm real thrilled with that. You know, I mean, it's getting there. If we could just get that one thing taken care of, then not that I'm happy with the vacancy factor, but I'll be more content with the report that I've got.
I'll see about doing that. Yeah, it is a rather manual report, so it is a challenge to produce in this format due to their system. However, we're not here to fail to meet the challenges, so we'll do our best to see if we can make that happen for you.
All right,
And we certainly appreciate that. Do you have other questions?
no, those were the two that I had for right
All
now.
right,
Thank you.
Councilman Daniels.
All right. I don't know if my question is directed at you or at you, Mr. Lawrence, but how many of these positions have been released by department heads to be filled?
That might be more of an HR or a question to the specific directors. I know HR has said that they facilitate hiring, but they're not always leading the process, in part due to just simply the workload that they have to deal with. I do know that from the perspective of hiring on behalf of finance, we have to engage HR to tell them we'd like to hire this vacancy that we have. We work with them to determine if there's any changes that need to be made within the position description. HR works with us on a strategy of selection. There's a very detailed process by which they make sure that we're going by all the steps of hiring in a legal manner, in a way that's consistent with best practices. That runs through the NeoGov system. So,
Yeah, and
it's-
if I could stop you just for a minute, we had Human Resources Director Sanchez Gazella in. She did a great job explaining the process, but I think at the time we had learned there were some 119 vacancies. There were only some 20 posted. So I think the question becomes, at this time, how many have been released? It sounds like you guys are not ready to answer that, but if we could get that answer and maybe get it over to Sherry so she could disseminate, I'd appreciate it.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Brown.
Thank you, President Hussein. Thank you, Jake, for being here. You just made a comment about this vacancy report, and I'm new to the council, and then you said something about it being manual. Is this a report that comes from Human Resources, or does it come from the Finance Department, seeing that it has the contract factors, what Councilwoman Wood was asking about?
So this really comes from a collaboration between the finance and HR departments. So there's a financial aspect into for the control of positions throughout the city. So we work with HR to determine, to keep track of positions, vacancies, reclassifications of positions that occur periodically, and transfers, people moving from one position to another. A lot of this is input as an FTE budget into the One Solution software, but that is difficult to keep fully updated. HR keeps their own list, and I keep my own list that we can cross-reference against each other to make sure that none of us have any errors. And overall, we meet together to make sure that it balances, that we both have the same number of positions. And occasionally there can be quirks in how the data is input that may not show a vacancy at a particular point in time that should be there. Through a bit of manual effort, I work with the staff of HR to make sure that this is put together as best as we can.
So this is not one report, because it seems like it's from a system that we have one report that you can push a button and automate and say, this is what our current vacancy status is, as well as the vacancy factor.
That would be great.
That's not possible currently with the current systems?
Not with the current systems. I believe a few years ago when I started, Eric Brewer put together a fairly detailed report on the steps that need to be taken to produce this report. He might have that in his records.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions, comments? All right, do you have anything to add, Mr. Brower?
No, thank you very much.
All right, well, again, I really, really appreciate you accommodating us and being available the last two committee of the holes, truly. Thank you so much. Brings us to our next presentation. This is the City of Lansing Equity Matrix. I believe we do in fact have Guadalupe Ayala, who is our Chief Diversity Officer. Who do we need to accommodate? We have a big group back there. How many folks are we gonna need to accommodate in the well?
So we will have Andy here and Linda.
Okay.
And
So Mark is fine where he's at.
I think we're.
Nope, I think you're good.
And then we
All
just
right,
need
fantastic.
Linda, if you want to chair, either way.
Okay.
There's chairs over there, Linda. Or is it more comfortable for you?
All right, Vice President Wood, as they're getting set up.
Are you able to see the?
As part of a focus group that we were doing in my other job, we were given an opportunity to see the city of Lansing's equity matrix. I was so impressed with some of the information that it was produced in the data, and I knew council had not yet had an opportunity to see it. That's why I reached out to the president to see if we could have this on, if they would be able to explain it to council, because I believe it is a great tool for us to use as we're working in our neighborhoods, as well as we're talking to other businesses and things like that. So,
Yeah, and I too was impressed. I think it very, very well done, but I think it's critical that people know that this thing actually exists. And so we certainly appreciate you all being here. If you want to first introduce your guests, and then you can take it away.
Yes, well, thank you, Council President Hussein and Vice President Wood for the invitation. We also think this is a great opportunity for the community to learn more about the tools. It's two tools, the Equity Matrix and the Workforce Diversity Dashboard. So my name is Guadalupe Ayala, a stated diversity officer for the city of Lansing, and with me I have Andy Skelton from the city's IT department, Linda Sanchez-Gacela, who is also part of the Equity Executive Team. And in the back, he'll be coming forward after Andy's presentation is Sam Kwan, also from IT Department. So we will both, the three of us will be presenting and alternating, because we need the screen. So we also want to thank a few people. Critically, Sam and Andy from the city IT department, because they really are the ones who did all the digging as far as the research, the collection of the data, but most importantly, putting the tools together. Without them, I don't think we could be here today, and we are really appreciative of them. In addition, we also, to the creation and tool, they're always accessible into being in community events such as this, and also the press conference, and also at the HRCS Community Forum, where I was able to model a lot of what they did and to give a more in-depth presentation of what the tools entail and what they have to offer. We also worked with the city of San Antonio and message makers, Andrea Collier, and a few of our departments here in the city to actually, understand what was needed and what they were using. So it's really vital. They were very vital to putting these out, and also for the community to understand what they were all about. So we are very excited about these tools as well, because they're really innovative, and from our research we found that we are the first city in the state of Michigan to actually offer these tools to our community. So we're really proud of that. And I will go ahead and follow the slides you should have in front of you as well. Can't see. Oh, it does. Okay, I'm like pressing away my go through. Or Faith, you can click on it. It's not working for me. Yeah, we struggle. Okay. Okay. So the two tools, the Equity Matrix and the Workforce Diversity Dashboard, can be found at the lansingmi.gov/equity. We also added a few tools at the main webpage where you can find them in the quick links and under the government tab. So wanted to make it really accessible to everybody. And in the website, we also have an infographic that gives like a little bit details of walking it through, and also a video that we put together for people that need that assistance into really seeing how it works. So we will get started with the Equity Matrix. We'll try one more time. There we go. So the equity matrix is the tool that Andy Skelton put together, and it really helps us like visualize the local demographics and the disparities, which will lead the users, and the users again can be anybody, city leaders like yourself, employees, organizations, community members, to really identify the needs and drive, their decision making, their planning, their policies, strategic interventions, or calls to action, investment decisions, and stakeholder engagement, and so forth. So it's a lot that we can do with it. And as stated, we were at the HRCS Community Forum. We heard a lot of great feedback, and we're excited, that the HRCS Advisory Board is going to be reviewing those applications, and they actually are going to be able to see if any of the organizations that applied actually use the tool. So I'm excited to hear the feedback from them. So the intention is that this information will lead the user to really prioritize like specific services, specific ways of doing programmatic delivery, to one that really like centers the disparities and center an outcome-driven approach to closing those disparities. The first step is really understanding and being able to visualize what these tools, what are the gaps when using these tools, and the equity matrix really does that for us. So it is an interactive map where you can zoom in and zoom out, and I will leave that to the expert, Andy Skelton, who will walk through, and Sam is going to pull up the website and the TVs for you all to follow along.
Okay, as stated before, all of the data that drives this map I collected from the U.S. Census American Community Survey 2019 5-year estimate. So a quick note about why I'm using 2019 data. Due to the pandemic, the ACS collection was delayed, and I've been keeping an eye on when that will be released, and it will be released soon. So as soon as that data has been released to the public, I will go through, collect it, and update the map. So the very first map that people will see on this is the race index. And so this is an aggregate of the community of people of color within the city of Lansing. So all non-white, so Black, Indigenous, Asian, were all summed up into one category. So this category was then divided into 5 groups with an equal number of observations, or census block groups, within each classification. It's known as a quintile classification. So then, once I had all of everything divided up into its classifications, I gave each group, depending on the percentage, a score. So a score of 1 would be the lowest percentage, and the lightest color, or so 0 to 15.7%, all the way up to the highest percentages, 53.8, all the way up to 80.9%, was given a score of 5. It's also the darkest colors that you see on this map, and then ranging in between.
Can I stop you just for a minute? Thank you so much. Councilman Garza?
Thanks, Council President. Appreciate you guys being here tonight. Thank you very much. With the matrix that you just showed us, and I understand you're probably getting that from the U.S. Census. Now, with the way that the categories are for the race and ethnicity, I'm concerned about how that obscures, the racial identities of Latinos in our community. So how are we able to assist with the disparities of our community for the Latinos here in Lansing and make sure that, their racial justice is actually being, looked at and made, a point to take care of that community in this community?
Yes. So we are using, again, as you said, the census data, and in the census data, you can identify as Hispanic. So you'll be able to see, where the area with using the, sorry, I was looking at the map. Using the race index, you'll see, as Andy explained, the darker the colors, the higher the index score. And that means that that's the place in the city where most people of color live. you can't really, the data, the organizations or the individuals that use it can use it at however they want it. We can't really specify, oh, we're gonna help out Latinos, we're gonna help out Asians, but we can really see where they are located. And that's kind of why we wanted to refer, I forgot to say that at the end of my part, is that if we want to refer the questions at the end, because Andy really gets into the details as far as when you click in a block group, you'll see it divided. So for example, it'll say in this block group, there's 100 people, and out of those 100 people, 20 are Hispanic and 3 are Asian.
But I think that's the question. So when you look at people of color, the groups are segregated out. So you have the black,
Yep.
you have the American Indigenous, you have the Asian, the Pacific Islander, but you don't see on any of these, at least I wasn't able to find it, a group for Latinos as an example.
Yeah, but they're under Hispanics, which some of them may be identified as, both Latinos and Spanish. So, Hispanic, I mean.
No, I understand that, and I'm sorry that, I asked a question, you weren't finished, so excuse me, I pardon my excuse here, but, I just know that, like in the 1930s, when they used to identify a specific race for Hispanics and Latinos, they used that for, rounding people up and taking them back across the border, same with Japanese people, and, the list goes on. And that has never changed, and I thought that maybe they were potentially going to do that during the last administration, so now I'm just afraid that I'm concerned that these numbers are obscured, and how are we able to look after the needs for the Latino population in the city of Lansing when we don't really have a sense of how many there are in the city because of how you have to identify.
Yeah, and yeah, it is a concern, and it's, again, we can utilize the matrix and the data that we have, and we can say, that's a call to action, that is missing, and our community can really see that and say, that's not there, and look at the data, you can visualize that there's a lot of people of color in this area, but how do we know that they are Latinos? Because, we don't ask that question. So I think we can utilize it in our own ways to, explain those concerns that you have.
Okay, Andy, so what we'll do is we will hold the rest of our questions as it pertains to the matrix
Yeah.
until you're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, like Guadalupe said, I really do get into the data a bit. I am a little bit of a data nerd. So each block group is interactable. This was designed for people to really get into, take a look at what their neighborhood looked like. So you can click on a block group, you can see, not just a breakdown of the percentage of people of color, but you can see Hispanic, you can see Black, you can see Indigenous. Anything that was collected by the American Community Survey, I tried to show in this map. And so up on the right side of the map there, we also have an average across the entire, across all of the block groups of people of color available there at 35.2%. And then below that is a breakdown of race across the entire city overall within that pie chart. And so moving on into the next map is income. And so the income data available from the U.S. Census covers a fairly wide range of incomes across the city, all the way from no income at all, or up to and over $2 million annual income. And so what I did is I took that broad range, divided it up into 5 classes, and then focused solely on the lowest class of 0 to $24,999 annual income. And so looking just at that lowest bracket there, I do the same sort of analysis looking at to get the index score. Again, dividing it up into 5 classes, same number of observations per class, and then assign it an index score going from 1 at the lowest number of people within that census block group, all the way up to 5, showing the highest number. Again, colors going light to dark respectively. And so you can, again, same with this map, you can really look into and get a sense of what the block group looks like as far as income goes. You can click on a block group, you can see information about it, and then you just kind of really get to take a look and see what the city looks like. I also include, again, the average percentage for this income bracket across all of the block groups. For this one, about 26% block group wide fall into this category. And then below that is a breakdown of city income for all 5 of my income brackets across the city. You can kind of get a sense to see where income-wise the city sits at. So the next map is a combined index map. And so what this map does is it takes the index scores of the 2 previous maps, the race and the income, and it combines them together for each block group. So because of that, instead of starting at 1, I start at 2 and go up to 10. So this gives designed to give an illustration of where low income and high numbers of low income and people of color live within the city, a combination of the previous 2. So for the next map, illustrates language spoken across the city. And so this specifically looks at households of limited English-speaking ability. And so the U.S. Census actually has a fairly well-defined, has a really good definition for what constitutes as limited English speaking, and that is any household where no member 14 years or older speaks only English or English very well. And there's more information about that definition linked to, as part of this dashboard to the U.S. Census website. You can see more information about what they consider as limited English speaking. So again, the index score is calculated exactly the same way, 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest percentage of these households of limited English speaking ability, down to 1, which is the lowest percentage. And so again, showing an average across all block groups, average block group across the entire city is again displayed, as well as a breakdown of languages spoken across the households within the city of Lansing. So English, Spanish, so on and so forth. So the next map, the last one that shows this index score, focuses on education. And so this is looking at, on a block group level, the percentage of people 25 years of age with no high school diploma or equivalent, such as the GED. And same method as before. I try to be consistent in my methods here, so it makes sense. It's used to get the index score for each. So starting out with a 1 index score of 0 to 2.1%, up to a score of 5, which is 16 to 42.6%. And so the average across all block groups within this category is around 9.7. And then down below is a breakdown of educational attainment across the entire city. So the final map, I know there are a lot of maps here, but this, as I was doing my research, I discovered this to be a very nuanced topic. So I believe it warranted a fair amount of information here. This is a map of historical redlining within the city of Lansing. So a little bit of history on that. In the 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation created a series of maps of cities across the U.S. Lansing was one of them, detailing neighborhoods within each city that it looked at, breaking them down into categories of what they called perceived risk regarding home loans. And so each of these areas was divided into one of 4 categories. The very top, starting out, is A, or as I also called it, best. These are areas where it was easiest to secure a favorable home loan. So fairly affluent neighborhoods, majority white population. And so the next step down from that was B, or still desirable. These are areas where it was still relatively easy to get a mostly favorable home loan, still reasonably affluent, still a fairly high white population, but starting to be more diverse in its population. So the next step down from that is C, or declining. These are areas of lower income, starting to see more non-white families. And so loans in these areas were more difficult to get, and the terms attached to these loans weren't nearly as favorable. So finally, the very lowest level, D, is hazardous. And so these are areas of low income, majority black neighborhood. Loans in these areas were, if not impossible, very difficult to get. And the terms on them aren't exactly that favorable. So to provide some context to this map, I added in another layer, looking at income in another way. So from HUD, from their Community Development Block Grant Program, they offer up areas of low to moderate income. And so this is data that our development offices use in when they look at neighborhoods and figure out where their efforts are focused. And so it's another way to kind of look at and get some context for the historical effects from this practice. All right, and so with that, I turn it back over to Guadalupe. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andy. And I think you mentioned too how you will update the data over time as it becomes available. And also I know that we are working and getting like feedback and also just, within our internal meetings on how we can make it better. And one of the things that we can say that's forthcoming would be like adding the layers of the wards. So that way for you council members, it would be like really helpful to see how your ward and you can outline it and really see what the makeup is. So I appreciate Andy and looking forward to making this better. So
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Andy.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. So he'll go in the back and we'll have Sam Kwan come in.
Is mic working?
I'm not sure.
Test. Okay, I'll just stand right here.
Sounds good.
Next,
So
we're going to...
I'm just going to give a little intro,
go ahead.
Sam, just of like a little background of the workforce diversity. So it is the workforce diversity dashboard. It does compare the diversity of the city's full-time and part-time workforce compared to the community. So in addition to the breakout of the demographics, it also gives the information about the number of employees and also the average years of service. So we know that the city of Lansing has a commitment to recruiting, hiring, developing, and promoting a diverse workforce that mirrors the city and its population. So it is a great tool for city leadership to analyze the disparities within our workforce and really modify their recruiting strategies. And our intent really is to monitor this data over time and see how we have progress in our goals that we set, each department set for their workforce. So, sorry, Sam, you can go ahead.
thank you for this opportunity to present about our diversity dashboard. I'm just waiting for it to come up on the screen. So basically, the data in the workforce diversity dashboard, as Guadalupe said, is coming from basically two sources. One, it's coming from the U.S. Census, which gives the community makeup. And two, it is coming from our HR payroll system to show what the representation is for our employees. So this dashboard does not include seasonal, temporary, or contract employees. And the employees that are in here, basically, they might have self-identified or not self-identified. As a policy, the city encourages our employees to voluntarily self-identify their racial or ethnic makeup, but that is voluntary and is not required. So what you're seeing here on the dashboard is the breakout among the racial categories that we are showing. In the bold numbers, they are coming from our payroll system, so those are the city employees that you're seeing. In the community makeup section, it shows the percentage of that makeup within the community from the U.S. Census. Within this dashboard, we also have the ability to filter the data. On the upper right-hand corner, under Departments All, right now it's showing all employees, but you're able to filter by departments to see the makeup of the employee workforce in comparison to the community as well. So right now, we're looking at the assessors department, and we can see their makeup of employees racially. If we look at the bottom left-hand corner, right now we're looking at the summary tab. If we go to the details tab, it dives into additional details based on race and gender, as well as years of service. So within here, in the chart, in the table, you see that there's 830 employees right now employed by the city. From the race and gender chart, you're able to see that female employees are represented by the red, and male employees are represented by the blue. And you also could tell that the average year of service is 10 years. Within that chart to the right, you see that there are 23 people that have less than a year of service, but then we have one employee that's been in the service of the city for 36 years. Within this, you also have a slider where you're able to slide across and zoom in to certain parts of the chart so that it'll display a little better. So basically, that is a overview of the workforce diversity dashboard, and I'm going to turn it back over to Guadalupe.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you again for all the work that you did in putting this together.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. But we're going to have Sam and Andy, too, for any questions you have, so they're here to stay. And if I'll go back to my slide. That is the overview of the tools. We really hope, the community is able to utilize it. Leaders like you are able to utilize it to help, the way that we drive policy, the way that we collect data, and that when we apply for grants. So we're excited really to hear any feedback and any recommendations, not only from you, but also from the community. So we have a email where people can reach out to us or call us, and if they have any recommendations of a pot of data that Andy and Sam can dig in and make the equity better and greater, that would be, that's also there. So it is really like an intent that we improve like the outcomes of, when we improve the outcomes or the way that we work with those that are more in disparity, that at the end, all residents can really benefit from that. So we're excited and open for questions. Again, Linda and Andy and Sam and I are here.
As a point of information, with the workforce dashboard, the information or data from the city side is as current as March 8th, and we're updating it on a quarterly basis.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do we have questions or comments? Councilman Daniels?
Thank you, President Hussein. My question is, when we're talking DEI on this dashboard, are you guys including people with disabilities as well? Is that on there and I just didn't see it?
At this time, we're not.
Okay.
But that's something that if we were able to have access to that data, we could incorporate that as something in the future upon the discretion of the administration.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Garza, then Vice President Wood.
Thank you, Council President. I guess this is just more of a comment, going back to what I said earlier. I believe those numbers are pretty skewed as far as the 12.4% of the community makeup is Latino because of the way you have to identify it with the census. So I would hope the city is putting some kind of effort in place to help service the needs of that community, because I believe the community population is quite higher than that 12.4%. Thank you.
Vice President Wood, then Councilman Brown.
I would encourage you to reach out to Disability Network. They would be a good group for you to partner with. They have huge statistics that would help for, they do it for the Tri-County, but they would have it for our area. So I would encourage you to reach out to them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilman Brown, then Councilman Spatafor.
Thank you, President Hussein. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was so informative, and it really is encouraging to see how much effort and thought that you all have put into this, and then also looking at it from so many different perspectives. So I appreciate that and wanted to say that. A few questions. I agree with Councilman Daniels and as well as Councilman Garza. And I had a question about the updates. I noticed you guys said you're pulling data from different groups. Is that something, it sounds like it's very automated, or is there some type of system when new data comes, we're pulling from it automatically? So that was a question, and then I have a few others.
I need to apologize. I've spent way too much time at punk shows in my 20s, so I've lost some of my hearing. Could you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. My question was, I noticed that we talked about we're taking data from other resources and inputting it into the different reports that we're providing. And I heard a comment about we're doing that manually. So my question is, when new data is available, does it automatically pull into our system, or is that something like a staff has to do and has to be mindful to say, I have to look at it every 2 months or every year?
That is something that Sam and myself will do ourselves.
So what we do is monitor when data is updated. With the American Community Survey, it's periodically updated. The next update is going to be March 17th. So when that date hits, the data will be available to us, and we would basically update it at that time. Same with our HR data. That information is always changing. It is not automated, but we're going to run a report on a quarterly basis so that it is updated on a quarterly basis.
Thank you for that. I would encourage you guys, if there was an automation process available, or if, to try and program something, because as you guys add data, as you guys have expressed that you want to continue to allow the information to be free flowing and add to according to community participation, it might get cumbersome to keep track of it all, and we don't want something that's so great now to be saying, well, we don't know how if it's updated or not.
Yeah, part of the challenge is that we're working with 3 different systems. So we have to pull data from the U.S. Census Bureau, which is their proprietary system that we're allowed to export. And in order to automate the process, we would need to do some programming and look at if there is a application program interface that can connect to the data and automatically update it. So that's part of the challenge that we have. But we will look further at the possibility of automating the process. I know that with HR data, we have to run it through a Python program in order to get it formatted and presented properly so that we can upload it into our website.
Well, fantastic. I want to encourage you guys to at least investigate to see those possibilities. My next question is, I noticed that we had some of the maps that were combined data, but do we have it where all of the maps that we've provided are able to be combined so we could see different layers together as one overview?
That is possible, but what happens is that it gets too cluttered, and it makes it difficult to distinguish different aspects of it. So that's why they're kind of separated into their own categories. And the only composite that we have is both, it's with race and income.
Okay.
But if we want to create a composite of multiple categories, we could do that. That is something that we can look into.
And maybe create a different key, because I heard, and to the point of that was like people with disabilities, we begin to add those, and then it's like maybe we have so many different maps we're looking at, but if, we could find a way to modify the key where you maybe blend them together, but so it's not overwhelming, but still provides, that in-depth data, because, I've been an advocate for people with disabilities, and I was concerned about that as well, is are we looking at that population and how is it spread across our community? Additionally, we have so many community partners. I think Guadalupe spoke about it, and I did see this during the HRCS forum, which was phenomenal. In the presentation, I was very encouraged. We have so many community partners when we're talking about equity and services, and I think that's where some of this was utilized to say encouraging community partners. In other words, service providers that we contract with to deliver services for gaps in the need in the community. Do we have an anticipation to add them into this type of data? So when we're saying there's these different areas of need, let's say in a certain category, I live over in the Forest View neighborhood, so let's say there's a need there, are we showing that we might have 2 community partners that maybe provide basic needs or food pantry? I noticed that we're constantly talking about making sure that we're providing services and support in the community where it's needed. So if we have this kind of data, how are we able to understand or know that we're providing, some of the general fund dollars to, let's say, 70 or 80 organizations? Are they all on the south side? Are they all on the north side? Is that something that you guys are able to integrate into this type of mapping, so we can also be encouraged by the support that the community is providing, and that even people who may need help can visually see, if I'm in this area, we purposefully have funded this organization or provided some supplemental funds to ensure that delivery of care or services is accessible to those in need.
I think that is a great idea, and over time we can definitely make it better. And with the information of the email that we provided, I think that we want to hear success stories, and we want to hear how people are using it. So the more we hear it, the better. And I think organizations, not just the city, can utilize it in different ways. This is just something we launched in January, so we hope that they come over time. But yes, for like HRCS, one of the things when we started developing this equity matrix, our discussion was like, where are we doing the mobile food pantries? Is there somewhere in this map where we haven't targeted? So that's something where we're going to start using it within our own services that we offer in the city, and we encourage all departments to also do the same. Parks and Rec, they have been working with Andy, and they have created their own map where they are able to, you might be able to give more detailed information, but from my understanding is that they can see really the households that have taken advantage of their programs. So what about that area where there's no families taking advantage of the area? Maybe go target that community center a little bit better. So, yeah, we're definitely encouraging other agencies, outside agencies to do the same, and also encouraging like our department heads to also do the same. But we have to start getting that feedback in order for us to provide that in the equity matrix, because right now we don't have anything because, again, we just launched it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. So regarding the email, which was equity@lansingmi.gov, is that on the website as well?
Yes.
And it says for any input, please give us a call. Excellent. And to that last point, I appreciate the time, everybody. To what Councilwoman Wood was saying, as well as Garza, we do have all of those community partners that we're currently servicing. And I found over the years, just being in the community myself, when you're getting services or working with a community partner, you have a level of trust because you're working with them, and maybe it might be over long term and working with the staff. Are we pulling local data, indirect, grassroots to integrate into the, United States Bureau, Census, and all of those things where people are maybe as comfortable? Are we working with the community partners to say, how many people have you served, or, do you have any data that we can, input and add as local data? For example, let's say Crystal Ray. Let's say they serve a high Hispanic population and they're located in the community. They might say, well, we serve 300 or 400 people in this area, even though it might only show 2 on our actual report. So do we have a thought or a process to get local data, more grassroots, where it could be more the makeup of the community because of that trust and relationship that's been built?
We're not collecting that data. Again, it's something that we can look for in the future. And if anybody, hits that pool of data or that we're missing, such as things that you're mentioning, please contact us. Because, we want to make sure that this, over time, it gets better and it's more able to be utilized in different ways.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, seeing no other questions or comments, we certainly appreciate your time. We really do. You
We
filled
thank
a number
you.
of tough questions. I think you did a great job. And we know just by looking at this how much work went into this, and then we know obviously the continued support that's going to be necessary to keep this current. We just hope that it can truly provide for that intentionality as we make decisions and move forward. So thank you so much. Really
Thank you,
appreciate your
President Hussein. Now I'm going back to what he said in the beginning, and for the time and also the opportunity. And we hope to hear more feedback and comments in our email. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We appreciate all of you. That brings us to agenda item C, discussion action. We have one item today, and we have a closed session. So Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. Pursuant to MCL 15.268C of the Open Meetings Act, I hereby move that we recess into closed session for strategy and negotiation sessions connected with the negotiation of the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Lansing and Teamsters Local 214 as requested by the city.
There is a motion on the floor for the discussion. Seeing none, Clerk Boak, would you take the roll, please?
Councilmember Hussein.
Yes.
Councilmember Wood.
Yes.
Councilmember Spatafor. Yes. Councilmember Spitzley. Yes. Councilmember Garza.
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson. Councilmember Daniels. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-1.
All right. After a quick closed session, we will reconvene. We have one resolution for action before adjourning. We will start the city council meeting after that time. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and reconvene. Let the record reflect a time of 6:55. That moves us to agenda item number 7 for action. We have a resolution. Vice President Wood.
Thank you. At this time, I would move for the ratification of the tentative agreement and CBA of the Union Teamsters 214 supervisory and non-supervisory units. And this impacts approximately 21 employees.
All right, there's a motion on the floor for the discussion. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. With no other business before the body, we are adjourned at 6:55, and we'll start our city council meeting at